Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, September 30th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Rutgers game is tomorrow, the game against Michigan in 57 days. We just got our last chance to talk to Ryan Day in advance of Saturday's game against Rutgers, and there's some updates on injured Buckeyes and a few other things to discuss today, along with a preview of what this year's Scarlet Knights team is going to bring to Columbus on Saturday. My guest today is Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He just wrote an exhaustive preview of the game with his weekly Tale of the Tape column. He's going to be sharing some of what he learned looking at Rutgers football so that you don't have to. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I'm here to do the dirty work, and apparently that's looking at Rutgers and seeing what they've done, and Tale of the Tape is a favorite piece, and I'm doing, I got a piece dropping later today as well in terms of some other stats. A lot of stuff going on. I've done more work on Rutgers than maybe anybody should.
Hope you were wearing safety glasses or using one of those Eclipse viewers. This is not the worst Rutgers team we've seen, but these games have not been super competitive over the years. We'll get to that. Before we do get to that, did want to touch on a couple things. First of all, updates on some of the Buckeyes who maybe have missed some time recently. Ryan Day does not generally give out too many specifics on injuries during the course of the week. So there's a little bit of reading the tea leaves that you have to do when he starts talking about guys. But to me, listening to him talk, my takeaway was the guy who maybe had the best chance to play this upcoming week. If any of those guys are going to return, I feel like maybe Denzel Burke has the best chance of being back on the field this weekend.
Yeah, that was my take as well. It sounded like it was close-ish of he would have been able to go in the last game against Wisconsin, but it was too close to win whatever happened, and they wanted to give it a little bit more time. We saw Burke out there, and he obviously had his hand wrapped, so, we're thinking hand, finger type of situation, but I would expect to see him. I mean, that's not to take anything away from the combination of defensive backs that they had out there with Jalen Johnson and with Jair Brown, but I think Denzel Burke certainly could come back out there, but I think that they might try to rotate him a little bit. I mean, and this is our own extrapolation there, but I think that you want to sit there and get him rounded back into form as much as you can, but you probably don't want to overwork him either, especially if he's at somewhat of a diminished level.
Yeah, and we'll get to Rutgers later on, but, I don't want to spoil anything. This is probably not the most high-flying passing attack that Ohio State's going to face this year, so they probably can play without Denzel Burke if they need to, and if they want to just give that hand and, another week of rest, that's probably an option, and they will probably squeak through with a win with or without him, but they have played it fairly cautious with injuries, so I think he might be the most likely to come back. I'm still not sure. I think it's better than 50-50 that he does actually play, but we'll see. The other guys, he was asked specifically about Cam Brown, the other starting corner who missed last week, and also wide receiver Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and just the way he answered that question was just kind of, it felt like no news is no news, and no news means they're probably not playing this weekend.
Yeah, not to take this into a wrestling direction, but there's a term called no-sell, and when a no-sell is when somebody hits you with like their big move or their finishing move, and you act like it doesn't do anything to you. He no-sold that question. He really just was like, yeah, there's no update, and that's that. And generally, we've had several years to work with Ryan Day now between being the OC and being the head coach. And when he no-sells, we know that generally means no. And, so I'm not expecting to see Jason or Cam Brown. Stranger things have happened. On Saturday, we will get an availability report. And we've also learned not to put too much stock in that either as things change. He did say on Tuesday that they might hold off in terms of when they meet on that to put that list together, so it's a little more accurate. But I certainly would expect to see JSN and Cam Brown listed as unavailable.
Yeah, they have that has come out, and Tim Walton at one point this week said they knew on Thursday that Denzel Burke wasn't going to play last week, and then Denzel Burke was not listed on the availability report last week. So it was, we'll see how that comes out. It's that has been, let's just say, varying levels of reliable over the last few weeks, and seems like it's more so varying this season than it has before. So we'll see how accurate it ends up being this week. Now on to Rutgers. You have done a deep dive on them for your weekly Tale of the Tape column. You can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It will certainly be up Friday if it's not already. As part of that, you dug up some incredible stats on the series history between the Buckeyes and Scarlet Knights. Spoiler alert, Ohio State has won each meeting, and none of them have been particularly close. But, you texted Tony Girdman and I with a couple of numbers on Thursday afternoon that were, legitimate wow numbers. Share with people the scoring difference in the series since the start of the series in 2014, the scoring difference between Ohio State and Rutgers in the second quarter.
Yeah, Ohio State and Rutgers, obviously they played 8 times. Ohio State has scored 171 points in second quarters through these 8 games, the most of any quarter. Rutgers has scored 0 points. They have never scored a point against Ohio State in the second quarter. Just Ohio State proven to be a second quarter team. So if you have some sort of prop bet, I would say load up on that second quarter.
And, I think the reason behind that is first quarter, sometimes you come out with a scripted series and you can kind of come down the field and score. You've seen teams go down the field and kick a field goal or score a touchdown and then not do a whole heck of a lot the rest of the game. And so, you never know in the first quarter, and sometimes the offense for Ohio State could come out of the box a little slow, potentially. Second quarter, usually you've had time to adjust to whatever the defense is throwing at you. And then you can, the talent will sometimes win out there. And so it sort of makes sense that the second quarter numbers are lopsided. For them to be that lopsided is legitimately insane. And I guess the other quarter that was really of interest to me was the fourth quarter, because there has not been a game that has been competitive in the fourth quarter in this entire series. Rutgers kind of made it slightly interesting in 2020 with that, a bunch of weird trick plays in the second half that kind of kept it just close enough that you weren't playing the third stringers at any point in that game. But what was the series score with 171-0 in the second quarter? What was the series total in the fourth quarter between those two teams?
Rutgers, to its credit, has put up 42 points in the fourth quarter, and actually in 2 seasons has actually outscored the Buckeyes. 2020, it was 18-7. In 2014, it was 7-0, but Ohio State still takes the cake when it has its 2s and 3s out there, outscoring Rutgers 49-42 in the fourth quarter. By far, Ohio State's lowest quarter of the 4 quarters, with 100 in the first quarter and 105 in the third quarter.
Yeah, it has generally been 3 quarters of Ohio State doing more or less whatever it wants, and then Rutgers, when you get those 3s in there at the end of the game, the score will sometimes even up a little bit. I forget what the line was in 2019 when Ohio State was out there. That was the year that Chris Ash got fired midseason, and Nunzio Campanile was interim coaching the team, and it was one of the biggest lines I've ever seen, 52 or 54 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was around there.
Yeah, it was one of those games where Ohio State could have named its score. I think my pre-game score prediction was 222-0 in honor of the Georgia Tech Cumberland score from 1916. But it was one of those games where Ohio State really could have named its score. And, I think it ended up 56-21, but it was just, that was a function of Ohio State taking its foot off the gas very early, and Rutgers kind of still playing through the final gun just to, and putting up a couple touchdowns that obviously had no impact in the final result, but definitely did not allow Ohio State to cover that sizable spread. So we have seen a wide variety of Rutgers teams since they have joined the conference in 2014, ranging from maybe the worst football team I've ever seen in 2019 to sort of like almost passable football type substance. So where on that spectrum of Rutgers from terrible to just kind of bad, where does this year's team fall?
If we're going to put them on a sliding scale of 0 being the worst team that we've seen in going into this 9th year and 10 being the best one that we've seen, I'd still put this one maybe at a 3.5. And there's some serious issues. Noah Vedral was supposed to probably be the starter, and he's been hurt and he's not played. So Rutgers is kind of ping-pong between Gavin Wimsatt and Evan Simon at quarterback. Neither of them have really had a whole lot of traction. We're looking at a team that's sub 60% completion percentage. their run game's been okay, but if Wisconsin wasn't able to really run until the game was well decided, why is Rutgers going to be able to do that? On the defensive side of the ball, I think that their secondary is probably their strongest unit, but their front seven is pretty young. If you look at their depth chart, it's a lot of seniors and a lot of sophomores. And the sophomores are guys that Greg Schiano brought, and the seniors are just guys that they're just trying to get through the system and trying to, stop the dam from breaking, whether or not they're guys that were from Chris Ash or guys that they picked up in the portal. But there's some very deceptive stats out there when you look at the national stats, and I know that Tom is a big opponent of where we go sometimes with these stats because they're so deceptive. And you've got to remember that Rutgers was able to really make a lot of its stats by playing Wagner, a team that I don't think has won a game since 2019. But when you look at Rutgers numbers, I mean, they're pretty crazy in terms of like the Rutgers defense, and I'm pulling it up right here, allowing 56.5 yards per game against the run, second in the nation, 120.66 in terms of pass efficiency, 42nd in the nation, only allowing 17.2 points per game, 25th in the nation. Well, Wisconsin had some big numbers too, and we were buying those more because of historically what Wisconsin is, what the Wisconsin defense does, and Ohio State then hangs a 52 burger on them. This is going to probably be a worse situation where Ohio State's going to hang an even worse number on Rutgers if given the opportunity, and this is not a case of Ohio State throwing in the fourth quarter. I just don't think Rutgers is going to be able to do much to slow them down. And when you fill out the rest of Rutgers' schedule with games against offensively challenged Boston College, Temple, and Iowa, those numbers are highly inflated and are going to get popped.
Yeah, and Rutgers did, to their credit, go 3-0 in the non-conference schedule. They beat Boston College, which is probably in the battle of former Ohio State defensive coordinators. Greg Schiano beat Jeff Hafley by 1 point, which that's probably not a great sign for Jeff Hafley in year, 3 for him, and Greg Schiano, year 3 for him as well at Rutgers, in stint number 2 there. It feels like they're sort of trending the right way, but they're digging out of such a deep hole, and it's not going to just be a straight line up. It's going to be, you're going to have some fluctuations. It's going to waver a little bit, and this is probably a little bit of a downswing in the otherwise upward trend there. They beat Temple, but they beat Temple by 2 points. It was 16-14, not exactly a thing of beauty. And then, as you said, lost to Iowa last week, 27-10. I think they gave up a defensive or special teams touchdown. 14
of the points were scored by Iowa defensive on the defense. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, congratulations. You didn't give up 20 points to a Brian Ferentz offense, so that's good. But better than the last time Greg Schiano faced a Brian Ferentz offense, if you recall that one. But yeah, it is. It feels like this team is kind of okay. This is not quite the punchline of a Rutgers team that it has been in the past, but it also is a Rutgers team that is probably looking forward to getting away from the East-West divisional lineup. They seem like maybe of all the teams in the Big Ten East, they might be one of the. I guess them and Indiana and Maryland are all kind of very much looking forward to that. That blessed day when they don't automatically have Rutgers and Penn State and Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Michigan State on their schedule every year. What to you is the ceiling for a Greg Schiano Rutgers team in the Big Ten? Post division line, divisional play. If they're off of that, and you get Ohio State and Michigan off your schedule in certain years, could this eventually be an 8-win team? Is it a 7-win team? What's the ceiling? Is there ever an Outback Bowl level Rutgers team in the Big Ten?
Well, I don't want to move past my punchline first, then I'll answer that question. Last year, Nebraska was maybe the best 3-win team that we'd ever seen. Currently, this Rutgers team might be the worst 3-win team that I've seen in a long time in terms of what's overall there. But, as for your question, let's not forget that there's a lot of parity in that Big Ten West. And when you get the opportunity to maybe draw a lot of those teams on your schedule, do you get 6 wins? If UCLA doesn't turn around, UCLA will be in the league here in a couple of years. That Rutgers UCLA game will be on FS10 or something like that, or on Animal Planet. I don't know where they'll put that game because I wouldn't want to watch it, and I watch pretty much any game I can find. But I think that certainly 6 wins is not out of the realm of just, okay, we're going to roll out of bed and maybe have 6 wins. I think maybe on a real special year, maybe 8. I don't know. But I think what it's ultimately going to come down to is everybody's like, this Rutgers job is such a great job because you can recruit New Jersey. Yes, there is a ton of talent in New Jersey, but proximity doesn't get you these kids. Performance will. And until Rutgers has some performance, how are they going to keep all these kids home? So it's a chicken and the egg situation. Well, we're not going to be able to do it until we keep all these guys home, but we need to keep all these guys home to be able to do it. So I think that it's really going to take a situation of where the Greg Schiano staff is able to go and get a couple of 1-year rentals out there, some big names. How about DeQuan Finn from Toledo? I'm not trying to move him on to somewhere else, and he could probably do better than Toledo or than Rutgers if we're being quite honest with ourselves. But if he could go and get a couple of playmakers and put together a 7-win season or an 8-win season, maybe he'll have an easier chance keeping Ohio State and Penn State and some other schools from poaching in his backyard. But this isn't going to be. This is not a team as long as they're part of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten remains a reasonable facsimile of what I'm used to seeing. That's going to get to 10. I think 8 might be the ceiling, and I think that's going to be a very infrequent ceiling.
That's kind of where I think I see this ending up, because you're right. The advantage of having New Jersey high school players so close to home. I mean, there's some real good Catholic schools in northeastern New Jersey. There's a lot of talent in the Philly area, which is basically South Jersey or South Jersey adjacent. And I can remember as a kid, the Doug Graber and Terry Shea Rutgers teams, and it was just, the talk was always, well, if they can just get the New Jersey talent to stay home. And here we are, 30 years later saying if they can just get the New Jersey talent to stay home. The recipe remains the same. It hasn't worked yet, but, it worked okay for Greg Schiano the first time. I think I'm buying the Greg Schiano Part 2 thing more than I've bought just about anything else in the last 30 years of Rutgers football. But you're right. I think you can only buy it so far. This is not a team that's probably making it to Indianapolis anytime ever. But an occasional Outback Bowl once every 10 years or something, and then some other 5 to 6 and maybe 7 win seasons mixed in there. That seems like that's probably doable. And, if Greg Schiano ever gets them to a New Year's Day bowl game through something other than Texas A&M having a bunch of COVID, I assume he's going to get a statue at some point, but maybe make the statue a couple feet taller if he actually does get them there. So probably not going to happen this week, but it is a more interesting Rutgers team than we have seen in the past. And so we will all get to watch it together on Saturday. Lucky us. We will have our complete coverage pre and post game as usual on Saturday. There actually will be a lot to talk about because, as usual, with a Rutgers team, you're probably going to get to see a bunch of younger Ohio State players who you have not necessarily gotten to see before, with some of the Buckeyes' bigger names potentially missing the game on Saturday. You may even get to see some of those guys a little earlier than expected. So there should be plenty of interesting stuff to watch on Saturday. You can find all of our usual pre- and post-game coverage at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Kevin and Tony and I will be out at the game. We'll have our usual assortment of analysts and recruiting reporters and X's and O's guys all there to join and be a part of the fun. All again, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Subscribe there today. Hit that bell so you get notified when we go live. Because again, there should be a good amount of stuff to talk about, and plenty of young guys to watch and get a little glimpse of Ohio State's football future as well as its present. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.